Hi, welcome to Just Be for Parents. This series of videos is to support parents' wellbeing during this latest lockdown. We recognise and identify the particular challenges that parents face at the moment. Many of you working from home or key workers still going out to work, and then coupled alongside that we're homeschooling. And so we wanted to deliver these separate sessions just for parents that really have an emphasis on how we can support our well-being with all these demands that are on us at the moment. So you may have noticed yourself that you're feeling the overwhelm at the moment, physically, emotionally, mentally, that we're carrying all these loads with us of our commitment to our work and to our employer, our commitment to our children, our commitment to our partners, and our commitment to ourselves. And it's that last bit that often gets kind of dropped down the priority list when there's so much else going on. And so this video and the others in the series are really designed to be very quick chats full of advice and ideas that can help to really boost and bolster your own well-being at a time when we really need to make sure that we are as happy and as healthy as we can be in order to fulfill all those different roles and demands that we have on us. So this first video is all about boundaries, and what we mean by that is putting healthy boundaries in place that ensure that we are able to safeguard our well-being despite all the pressure that we have on us at the moment. So I've split it into three different categories, and we'll look at each one in turn, and there's a chance for you to then reflect on and think about how can you address putting these boundaries into place for your own set of circumstances, for your own family, in order to make sure that we are keeping our boundaries healthy. It's very easy at the moment with our work, our schooling, our home life, our free time, all limited to our home space. Those of us that are still key workers and going out into the outside world again, obviously there is that, but that in itself brings with it other challenges. But when we are living so insular, we're not leaving the house as much, we are working from home, we're schooling from home, we're relaxing at home, other than maybe the odd walk or bike ride or something, we have to put some boundaries in place in order to make sure that our work day doesn't extend into our free time, that the school day finishes at an appropriate time, because it's very easy when everything is at home to think, well, I'll just do a bit here or I'll just do a bit of that there, and actually that's when we can start to see ourselves suffer. So looking at the first one here, we talk about the physical, our physical space around us. How can we put some boundaries in place in order to make sure that our workspace is kept separate, that it's not in our bedrooms, for example? Now obviously we may be limited on space, and it may be necessary to have your home office in your bedroom, or it may be necessary for your children to be working in their bedrooms in order for everybody to be able to work quietly and to be able to concentrate. But maybe then just thinking about, how do we mark the end of the day then? How do we separate when we're working in that sleeping space and when it's then time to relax and go to bed? Because sometimes what can happen if we are working and we're very productive in that space in which we also sleep is that we then find it very difficult to switch off. And this is very true for children as well. So maybe you can plan and think about at the end, you mark the end of the workday very specifically, and everything gets packed away, and there is then a good period of time where that space is no longer about work, and maybe even that all evidence of work is removed from the room. And the thing with that is, and I know I'm guilty of doing this as well, is for convenience we tend to leave things out, don't we? We know we're going to use them again later, or we know that we're going to need them again tomorrow, so let's just leave them up, leave them plugged in, leave everything out. the problem with that is it's still there, it's still very visible to us, and it can make it very difficult to switch off. So maybe if you've noticed that you're finding it hard to switch off, you could think about, is this one of the reasons why? Would it help to completely pack everything away? And it's almost like filing it away for the day, isn't it? And you might find that that really helps for the children as well. And that's true whether you're working in your sleep space or whether you're not. We're working at the dining room table, and so we've had very few meals sitting at the table because everything's set out and we don't bother to pack it away. And it does mean that therefore we're missing out on that coming together, although we might sit in the lounge and we're relaxing watching something on TV, usually something funny to kind of lift us up. But maybe we're missing that coming together at a meal time and sitting at the table like we usually do. So there might be things there around what can you do about that space that you're working in, that space that the children are working in as well. And within that, think about as well, you know, are you having to share your workspace with your children? How is that impacting on your productivity and their productivity? How are you demarcating when it's time for the children to work and time when you're working? Because this is one of the challenges that parents are facing at the moment when you're working from home. It's how do I remain productive to my employer or to myself if we're self-employed, while also supporting my child, and thinking about those boundaries of how much time can I give during the day to supporting my child with their learning, and when will I find something else for my child to do so that I may focus on my work, which is also important. And it might be worth having a conversation with your employer about the role of homeschooling and how that's impacting on your work, if there's flexibility in how you can do your role, and you know, which hours you work during the day. I think the top advice here is talking to employers and talking to school about making sure that each know the demands that you are facing at the moment, and within that it's okay to say this is hard, because it is. Working from home is hard enough to keep up productivity and motivation and momentum, and now we've flung in having to homeschool our children. On that note, we keep saying homeschooling or home learning. I think it's really important to recognise that homeschooling is a choice that families make after a lot of deliberation, careful thought, with a commitment to the time and the energy that goes into homeschooling. What we're doing at the moment is more like emergency schooling. I think we're all feeling emotional at the moment, but emergency schooling is what's happening right now. That schools have done an amazing job at setting up learning from home at a very short time span and set it up really well. But what parents are doing is emergency schooling. We are providing children with the necessary tools and devices to be able to access that learning, and we're supporting it as best we can. And one of the things, and I think this is why I just said emotional instead of emergency, is there are such strong emotions that come attached with when we are trying to school our children. So I'll come back to that point in a minute when I get down to the emotional boundaries that we might need to put in place. So if we continue with physical for a moment, when we're thinking about demarcating our workspace, marking the end of the workday, packing things away so it's out of sight, you know, the old saying, out of sight, out of mind, but also then thinking about how do we safeguard and ring fence our downtime as well, making sure that there is separate space away from where we've been working, where we are relaxing, a space that's just for relaxing. Again, this does depend on the space that you have, and it may not always be possible to have separate spaces for all of these. So if our spaces are becoming multifunctional, I think it is really important to have that boundary in place that says we are going to pack everything away, so that we can have dinner without looking at the work that's sat there still waiting to be done, that we can have a relaxing space where there isn't evidence of the to-do lists or whatever there might be. And also then boundaries, and in a physical sense, with the other people that we live with. It goes without saying we love our families more than anything, and at the moment we find ourselves in a very intense situation where we're spending a huge amount of time with our children. Some people are still key workers and going out to work, and I think while you're still going through the normal routine of leaving the house every day and coming back again, what comes with that is an emotional burden of the fact that in a time when everybody is in lockdown, that you are still going out into the big wide world and coming back into the home having been out there and possibly being with others. But making sure that you carve time out each day to have a little bit of time away from others when and if you feel you need it. We all have different limits on our energy reserves. Some of us recharge by being with others, others recharge by having time on our own. So noticing what sort of person you are can be really helpful in doing this. Do you need to go and have a bath and lock the door and make sure you can't be disturbed for a few minutes? Do you need to go and have a walk on your own to get a bit of headspace and just not have the demands of other people asking for you for things and needing you in one form or another? Or are you the sort of person that really genuinely recharges by being with your family, having that closeness, but perhaps not when you're working and homeschooling? So just noticing in yourself, what are these things that I need? There's quite a lot there to go through, wasn't there? And a lot of what I've said also comes into the next one, this work-life balance. My next video, which is all about balance, we go into this a little bit more, but it's really important that we have an end to our working day. I've certainly noticed that it's just too easy to reply to an email at gone 8 o'clock because you've heard it ping. It's too easy to start at 6:30 in the morning because you're up and you've heard your phone go or whatever. And this is very much the case for a lot of working parents when you're trying to fit work in around homeschooling the children. And if we're not careful, we find that our working day just extends and doesn't ever really stop. And so mentally, then we're not ever really switching off. So where you can, and again, it's not always possible, and this is in the kind of best case scenario, but where you can have that, I'm not answering any emails after this point, or I'm not answering any emails before this point, or whatever it might be. What works for you in the industry that you work in with your employer? And then lastly, and again we've covered a lot of these already, the emotional boundaries, and this is really about getting to know you and your limits. And I think a really key point here is not comparing yourself to anybody else. It doesn't matter if so-and-so down the road has got 4 kids and she's running her own business and I don't know, she goes running 3 times a week. Doesn't matter. She's doing what she needs to do to get through this, and you need to do what you're doing. We all have different demands. We all have different lived experiences of this pandemic. A saying I heard quite early on last year was, you know, we're all in the same boat. I don't think we are. I think we're all in the same storm, but we're all in very different boats. And so it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing, it's what works for you and what you need. If you need 30 minutes to yourself every day, take it and get it where you can. If you need time to go for a run, take it. If you need to go for a walk, whether it's walking the dog or just going on your own, or meeting a friend to go for a walk, do it. There should be no guilt involved in feeling like you need to get away from your family right now. It's necessary to have the space to recharge in the way in which we need to as individuals, and without guilt. And I know guilt is a strong emotion that a lot of us are feeling at the moment. One of the things that happens very quickly when we suddenly have to juggle all our roles is that we start to feel like we're not doing any of them to our full capacity. And of course that's true. We can't possibly parent as if we didn't work while working as if we weren't parents. It's not possible, and yet sometimes we feel like the pressure is on us to do just that. And so what we need to do is, as far as is possible, we need to let that guilt go. And that, I know that's easier said than done, but you can acknowledge that the guilt is there. You can acknowledge that feeling that you have, you know, I haven't done enough reading with the kids today, I haven't helped them as much as I should, I got angry when I couldn't explain something. You know, notice it and feel it, and then give yourself permission to let it go, because we are emergency schooling. We are not teachers at the end of the day. And I find a lot of parents that I've spoken to have said, you know, I feel like I should be able to do this. Let's take a step back. Why do you feel like you should be able to do this? You know, it's one thing to know how to do something yourself. It's quite another to know how to teach it to young children. And there should never be any shame in not being able to do that, as well as a qualified teacher, for example. And what guilt often does is it stops us from seeing all that we have achieved. Often what comes with guilt is shame that we're not enough, we're not doing enough, we're not being enough. And it's one thing that we really need to try and put to bed as quickly as possible, because we have to look at all the positives and the things that we are achieving each and every day. You're looking after your children, you're looking after yourself, you are facilitating them in their learning, and you're supporting it as best you can, and that is the important thing. Often we find things are very emotional at the moment when we're trying to teach our children, perhaps they don't get something, and we've kind of run out of ways to explain it to them, and they're still not understanding it, and then we've got this to-do list in the back of our head of what I need to get done before 3 o'clock this afternoon, and it all builds up and builds up and builds up, and then often it comes out in, you know, being a bit short-tempered, and then the kids are short-tempered, and then you're short-tempered back, and before you know it, everything's kind of blown up and everybody feels pretty rubbish. And this is going on in households everywhere, and yet we still tend to feel like it's just us. And this is why talking, finding your mum friends, your dad friends, finding people who are going through it with you is so valuable. But knowing where your limits are, and then recognising, when do I need to step back and take a break? Because ploughing on ahead when you're feeling the overwhelm is just kind of counterproductive. Taking a short break, going outside, letting the kids run around, just saying to them, you know, have 10 minutes watching TV or on your device, and you going and kind of just sitting down having a cup of tea. All of these things are respecting your limits and allowing you to recharge and come back to it fresh. And sometimes we need permission to do that it's okay to do that. So let's have a look then. There's a lot of information to take in there, so let's just have a look on the next slide at some of the things we can do to reflect on that and really think about what this might look like for you. So have a think about, how can you work out what you need to do? And I would suggest maybe running through your regular day at the moment. What is your routine like? And look at the points in the day when your energy levels really dip, when you're finding that your emotions are, you know, overwhelming you a little bit. Is it just before lunch when perhaps you're hungry? Is it during a certain point of the day, perhaps when you're teaching the children maths, or is it a point of the day when you've got the pressure converging from both work and homeschooling? Look at the points of the day and really close your eyes and run through your daily routine and think of every single thing you have to do, and really notice the effect on your mood and your energy levels. And as you bring each thing to mind, really, you know, notice what's that internal feeling like when you bring to mind that activity. That's a really good way for us to then think about, well, what do I need to put in place that's going to help me? Because there might be these flash points during the day. Then the next thing is, how can I implement them? Well, as we're talking about families, it would be a good idea to kind of talk to your children. This will depend very much on what age they are, but maybe even talking to them and asking them, what points of the day are you finding hard? Where in the day is it that they're perhaps craving that bit of downtime, that bit of a break from what's going on? Now, obviously, I'm sure children would kind of happily watch TV and go on their devices for huge chunks of the day, but we have to have the balance, don't we? There has to be the homeschooling and then there has to be the free time. But maybe they are aware of the bits of the day they're finding really hard. So having that conversation and kind of almost coming to that agreement on where the boundaries are going to be in order to look after everybody together. If both of you in the household are working from home, looking at where is the balance in terms of the role of who's supporting home learning. Is it shared? Is there a conflict in who's doing more than the other person? If you're on your own and you haven't got that support network at home, it is all down to you. How are you talking to your employer about how you need support? If you're a key worker and you're still having to go out to work and your child is going into provision in school, but maybe that there's then days where you're doing a bit of homeschooling at home, how does that work best for you? Because on the days perhaps when you need to rest and recover because that's your day off, how can we make sure that you really are having a chance to rest and recover? So thinking about all of that. And then lastly, how are you going to know if it's helping? Well, hopefully you will notice that there's less flashpoints in the day where you're feeling overwhelmed, where you're short-tempered, where you're feeling emotional, when your energy levels have dipped to nothing and you're just, you're exhausted. Hopefully all of those will reduce down, maybe even disappear altogether, because the idea is that we keep ourselves topped up all through the day, and that these boundaries are healthy boundaries in order to keep us topped up, keep our energy levels topped up, keep our emotions where they're manageable, and ultimately make sure that we're all thriving within the household. And thriving, and by that I mean thriving in the sense of as much as any of us can while we're going through this situation. So what next? Well, now that you've listened to the video, how about making a plan for your week ahead? Think about what changes you're going to try and make. And whenever we make changes, I always recommend that we set them as intentions. I intend to do this. And then if it doesn't happen, we don't add that to the list of things that we berate ourselves for. We set the intention, and we do so with a positive mindset. We have to remember that having healthy boundaries is essential right now, absolutely essential. That we're doing this in order to look after ourselves, and in turn be able to look after our children and our families and do our job. And so we can see this as what we often call the oxygen mask principle. Just like on a plane, you're always advised to put your own oxygen mask on first before helping anybody that you're with. Looking after your well-being is like putting on that oxygen mask. You look after yourself, and then you are in the best possible position to look after everybody else. And if you're interested in learning more about self-care, both for yourself and for your family, I'd really recommend these two books by a very good friend of mine, Susie Reading. And the first one, The Self-Care Revolution, takes you through lots of different ways that we can really look after ourselves. There's another video called Looking After Ourselves, which I've done for children and for staff and for parents, and it's based on Susie's Vitality Wheel. So check that out if you want to find out more about really how we can put self-care firmly within our daily and weekly to-do list. And then Standing Tall Like a Mountain is for children and families, and it's about self-care, mindfulness and yoga for children. And I was lucky enough to have Susie use one of my ideas for working with children in the book, which I'm very proud of. It's a great book which really goes through the same self-care principles as the other book, but in a much more child-friendly way, in ways that we can access with our children as a family. So have a great week. As always, if I can do anything to support your family and your well-being, contact me on the email address that's on the screen right now, or just let me know how you're getting on having watched the video. I wish you well. I send you the warmest wishes for the coming week.